Sony is going to ruin Spider-Man 4. According to insider Daniel RPK, Marvel and Sony have been negotiating for months because they can't agree on what story to tell in that movie. Marvel wants to make a grounded movie showing the aftermath of No Way Home, with Peter having to rebuild his life after his girlfriend and all his friends have forgotten who he was. It would be a back-to-basics approach, without technology and without other heroes as mentors, a role Iron Man and Doctor Strange had in previous movies. The only superhero who would join Peter would be Matt Murdock, because the events of Spider-Man 4 would connect with Daredevil Born Again Season 2.
Best idea ever!
Sony, on the other hand, wants to tell a multiverse story, trying to repeat the success of No Way Home. Instead of seeing Peter in New York facing Kingpin or Scorpion, we would see a second crossover with Andrew and Tobey right before the big finale of the multiverse saga in Secret Wars. And according to Daniel RPK, Sony just won the battle. Spider-Man 4 is going to be a multiverse story, and it will be released in 2026. The movie will take place entirely in Battleworld, which in the comics is a fusion of all universes in the Marvel multiverse, created by Dr. Doom. The script has not been written yet, but they could adapt the story of Morlun, one of Spider-Man's deadliest villains who wants to hunt down all the Spider-Men in the multiverse. Andrew, Tobey, and Tom can team up to face this villain, and maybe one of them will make an epic sacrifice to save the others.
No.
They can also faithfully adapt the origin of the symbiote. Originally, Peter merged with the symbiote in Battleworld, although back then, the symbiote didn't change his personality in any way. Spider-Man 4 can include modern elements while honoring the comics from the 80s, making Peter wear the black suit and become more and more aggressive. They can also bring in Tom Hardy's Venom, who would appear in Battleworld thanks to the fusion of all universes. They would finally give us what they promised us at the end of Venom 2. They can even do a crossover with Beyond the Spider-Verse, or introduce Null as a villain.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know how it sounds, but Null is one of the main Marvel villains that hasn't been adapted in live action yet. Don't forget, Sony is going to release Venom 3 in October, and in the first trailer for that movie, Venom mentions his world has found him. This could be a nod to Null, the creator and god of the symbiotes. Maybe the villain can show up in the post-credits scene of Venom 3, threatening to conquer Earth using his army. Using his connection to the hive mind, Venom would contact all the Spider-Men in the multiverse to ask for help, and the three Spider-Men would team up in Battleworld to stop Null. I know that in the comics, Null has nothing to do with the multiverse or Secret Wars, but if Sony is involved, anything can happen.
You are so right.
By this point, you're probably wondering, what's the big deal with all this? How are any of these stories going to ruin Spider-Man? They sound like interesting plots with a lot of potential, full of fan service, and will probably be super successful in the box office. They're going to give us what we want, and Marvel and Sony are going to make a ton of money, like they did with No Way Home. Can you imagine what the marketing of this movie would be like, including Andrew and Tobey on the posters?
I can't imagine.
But there are 4 big problems with this idea. The first problem is that you can't recycle nostalgia like this. No Way Home worked because it was a one-time event meant to be experienced once in a lifetime. It was a reunion of 3 generations of Spider-Man fans in a movie theater. Something similar happened with Deadpool and Wolverine, but Marvel can't abuse nostalgia with multiverse cameos in every single movie. It would be a big mistake to make the next Deadpool movie a second crossover with Wolverine, where characters from the Fox universe show up again, because it's something we just saw. The same would happen with No Way Home. Instead of being special and epic, it would feel repetitive, as if Marvel and Sony had run out of ideas. People wouldn't get as excited as the first time. Don't get me wrong, I want to see the 3 Spider-Men together again, but for that second crossover to excite us, there have to be other projects in between that aren't multiverse related. It would have been different if No Way Home had an open ending, like Infinity War or Across the Spider-Verse. If Andrew and Tobey had stayed in the 616 universe, and the villains hadn't been defeated, it would have made perfect sense for Spider-Man 4 to be a new crossover. But given how the story ended, we all want to see what happens to the characters separately, to see how they continue with their lives. Maybe you're not the biggest fan of Holland's Spider-Man, but you're probably more interested in seeing The Amazing Spider-Man 3 than a new multiverse crossover.
I would like to see that.
The second problem is that it's going to ruin the ending of No Way Home. The last minutes of that movie are perfect, because Peter finally learns learns that with great power comes great responsibility. In the first act, he tried to brainwash everyone to be accepted into college, a very selfish and irresponsible action, not at all worthy of Spider-Man. But in the third act, he sacrifices his entire personal life as Peter Parker to save his universe. He makes everyone forget who he is, so that no one has to suffer for his poor decisions. He didn't kill Aunt May, or put the 616 universe in danger on purpose, but he's willing to give up everything because he puts others' happiness before his own. He no longer uses Stark technology, because this Spider-Man isn't going to take shortcuts, and he doesn't tell MJ the truth when he sees her again. He knows his ex will get hurt if she keeps hanging out with him, so he stays alone, being the only one who knows the truth. It's a bittersweet ending, but it works, because Spider-Man is a character who always tries to do everything right, but things don't always turn out well for him. He's not always happy.
You poor thing.
It would make sense for Peter to be accompanied by a new cast of supporting characters from now on. Marvel should introduce Black Cat, Harry Osborn, or Gwen Stacy, played by new actors in the 616 universe. MJ can return for a cameo, or to complicate Peter's life with the typical love drama that's always present in Spider-Man stories, but the sense of responsibility must be present. I would even accept seeing Peter trying to abandon his civilian life, and dedicated himself to being Spider-Man most of the time, closing himself off and not letting anyone be part of his life. That would make the relationship between Spider-Man and Black Cat work, because Black Cat is attracted to Spider-Man, not Peter Parker. But if we have a multiverse story, none of that will matter. What does it matter if Peter has a secret identity if he appears in a new universe created by Doctor Doom? There's no way they're going to introduce us to a group of new characters in Battleworld. And Peter's college life won't be relevant in a story where the whole multiverse is about to be destroyed. They'll probably recycle the characters that had already showed up in previous movies to keep the story simple.
Oh, I don't want to see that.
Spider-Man 4 was supposed to be about Peter growing as a character and learning to balance his life as a normal person and as a superhero. He has to see life differently for his life to work, and realize that he can't be Spider-Man 24/7. But how are they going to do that in Battleworld? We can forget about the Daredevil crossover, or Kingpin as a villain, or seeing Spider-Man having grounded adventures in New York, which hasn't happened since 2017. That was 7 years ago. The third problem is that they're going to take away the relevance of all the other Marvel projects related to Spider-Man. Beyond the Spider-Verse is already in production, and it's supposed to get to cinemas in late 2025 or 2026. That's going to be the conclusion of a multiverse story, and I wouldn't rule out Andrew and Tobey making a quick cameo. But will Beyond arrive the same year as Spider-Man 4, which will also be multiverse related? Unless they manage to link the stories of the two films, Sony would be competing with themselves, because they're going to tell two very similar stories with the same character in a very short period of time.
Stupidest idea I ever heard.
To make things worse, Amy Pascal mentioned that they want to make a solo Spider-Woman movie as a spin-off of Spider-Verse. I wouldn't be surprised if that story also had to do with the multiverse. Even if Miles Morales doesn't appear, it would be a third multiverse story in just a couple of years. And it gets even worse. I'm sure we're going to see the three Spider-Men again in Secret Wars, but if we already see them again in Spider-Man 4 a year earlier, what's the point of Secret Wars? It would be the third time we see them together in less than 6 years. It would be so repetitive. Instead of making special appearances that make the cinema explode, Andrew and Tobey are going to become regular characters in the MCU, which they shouldn't be, because they don't even belong to the 616 universe. I want to see them again, but not in all the stories that have to do with Spider-Man.
That does make sense.
And we have the fourth problem. They're going to turn Holland's Spider-Man into a supporting character who can't stand on his own. In Homecoming, we saw Iron Man. In Far From Home, there was Nick Fury. In No Way Home, we got Doctor Strange, Andrew, and Tobey. And in Spider-Man 4, the other Spider-Men are going to show up again. It's as if Sony didn't trust that this Spider-Man can sell tickets on his own. And I know what you're gonna say. It makes sense for Spider-Man to cross paths with other characters, because he's part of a shared universe. I agree with that, but if they keep this up, Holland is going to be a supporting character in his own movies. They can't make a new trilogy with this Spider-Man if they keep relying on nostalgia, fan service, and cameos from characters from other franchises. They won't make this Spider-Man define a generation if they don't give him his own villains and a new group of supporting characters. And they are not going to sell tickets for Spider-Man 5 once they announce that Andrew and Tobey are not going to be in that movie.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
The smartest thing to do would be to make Spider-Man 4 a grounded story and only include a connection to Secret Wars in the post-credits scene. If Sony is so desperate to get all the Spider-Men together again, we can see Andrew and Tobey in that scene. Holland would be swinging through through the streets of New York, like at the end of No Way Home, but the 616 universe would disappear, and Spider-Man would arrive in a new city, which would be a fusion of the different versions of New York in several universes. In this new city, he would run into Andrew and Tobey, and the three would prepare to team up in Secret Wars. If they do something like this, Spider-Man 4 can work as a teaser for Secret Wars, and it could be a grounded story at the same time.
Good idea.
Sadly, Sony can't be trusted, and I'm afraid they'll fall right into all the problems that multiversal stories usually have. We explain those problems in this video over here.
I missed the part where that's my problem.